Public Accounts Committee.
Thank you, Chair. Good morning, Controlling Officer with your team. I'm Imango Mnyima Jr., Member of Parliament for Nalolo constituency in Nalolo District, Western Province, and a member of this committee.
Thank you, Chair. Good morning, PS and your team. My name is Alikandu Mufalali, nominated member and member of the Public Accounts Committee.
Good morning, Chair. My name is Nicholas Mukumbi, a Member of Parliament for Sorwezi West constituency in Karumbira District, and a member of this committee.
Thank you, Chair. Good morning, PS and your team. Honorable Umai Victor, my name. I am Member of Parliament for Chavuma constituency.
Good morning, Chairperson and honorable members. Good morning, Controlling Officer and your team. My name is Anton Mumba, Member of Parliament for Kantanshi and a member of this committee. Thank you very much.
Morning, Chair. Morning, PS and your team. My name is Jonathan Daka, Member of Parliament for Chadiza constituency in Eastern Province and also a member of the Public Accounts Committee.
Thank you, honorable members. AG, you can proceed.
Thank you, Chair. Good morning. My name is Mbewe Francis. I'm Deputy Auditor General, Audit, standing in also for AG. I'm accompanied by Mr. Patrick Simsokwe, Director Ministerial, Mr. Ken Chirawo, the Assistant Director, Mr. Rwamba Makasa, Principal Auditor, Mr. Sinyani, PRO, Mr. Simon Munyama, Acting Senior Auditor. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Accountant General's Office.
Morning, PS and your team. My name is Edward Zimbizi, sitting in for the Accountant General. I'm accompanied by Ms. Malisawa. Thank you.
Thank you. And Accountant General's Office, tell Accountant General to come tomorrow. If he doesn't come, he shouldn't come. Controller.
Thank you, Chair. My name is Gift Muruba, representing the Controller of Internal Audit.
Please tell the Controller to be here tomorrow. If he doesn't want to come here, he should tell us and he shouldn't come. Thank you. Can we have media? Thank you so much, PS. I'm Warren Chishamwambazi, Member of Parliament for Baramkuba constituency from Ndola District, and I'm the chairperson of the Public Accounts Committee. PS, I'll invite you to introduce your team. You can proceed.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, honorable members. My name is Mukuli Chikuba, Permanent Secretary for Budget and Economic Affairs in the Ministry of Finance and National Planning. With your permission, Chair, I'll allow my colleagues to introduce themselves.
Good morning, Chair. Good morning, honorable members. My name is Evaristo Chifumbano. I'm the Chief Accountant in the Ministry of Finance and National Planning. Thank you.
Good morning, Chair, and good morning, honorable members. My name is Gregory Kabwe. I'm Director of Investments and Debt Management in the Ministry of Finance and National Planning. Thank you.
Good morning, Chair. Good morning, honorable members. My name is O'Brien Siamekatai. I'm the Director of Finance, Ministry of Foreign Affairs and International Relations. Thank you.
Do we have any people from finance? Can kindly stand. Thank you so much, PS, before you proceed, let me just confer you with immunity according to Cap 12 of the National Assembly Powers and Privileges Act, that also in line with Standing Orders number 175, to ensure that whatever you submit before this House, you are protected. Also, if you intend to mislead this committee, the same act will work against you. Let me also now guide you that I will invite you to make your submissions, and you should follow the order. You are seasoned, you've been coming here, you read the query as it appears in the Office of the Auditor General, mention the amount involved where applicable, then your response and your action. Then thereafter, honorable members will ask you questions. I'm reliably told by the Vice Chairperson we've lost a day already. I think the submissions which were done yesterday were not properly followed. Even this morning we're having struggles to just see which paragraphs to start with. And we shouldn't expect that PS, especially from the Ministry of Finance, to have such lapses. So in that line, we are not starting with, we are supposed to start with paragraph 9 and 10, right? But we'll do 24 and 26. Then while I think the other two are being reorganized to ensure that honorable members also can follow. So PS, I'll ask you, I don't know if it's PS Mukuli or I'll ask you to proceed and start with paragraph 24. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. And I will, of course, we made the written submission. What I'll do, Chair, is to try and give a summary of the paragraphs, but touching on the main paragraphs which contain the figures, so that if anyone is following, Chair, they can follow as such. Chair, if you go to the first page of my memorandum, I will skip the Auditor General's introduction there and the mandate. I think these are well known. And I'll come to audit finding number 1.2, just to again highlight that an examination of accounting and other records for the financial year ended 31st December 2021 for Head 21, which is loans and investments, maintained at the Ministry of Finance and National Planning, reviewed the following. A, budget and income. In the estimates of revenue and expenditure for the financial year ended 31st December 2021, a total authorized budget provision of 22,166,995 kwacha and 44 was made to cater for programs under Head 21, which is loans and investments, against which amounts totaling 20,591,900,788 were released, representing an underfunding, Chair, of 1,575,000,000 and 94,255. The underfunding represents 7% below what was budgeted for. So that was the first query, Chair, and in response we are saying that we have taken, of course, note of the observations by the Auditor General, and they are factual. Chair, if I may just a bit explain that, of course, these were estimates, and estimates are what they are at the beginning of the year, but in terms of funding, the provisions depend on the actual collections by revenue collecting agencies. So sometimes we are below and sometimes above target. But with that, of course, we do agree with the finding of the Auditor General that it is factual, that that's what happened. Chair, on the second audit finding is on operational matters, financial investment management, and under the recapitalization and investments, which is one of the main sub-programs under Financial Investment Management Program under H21. There were findings on the program, which is meant for recapitalization of state-owned enterprises, provision of financing to micro and small medium enterprises, and funding, of course, to the citizens' economic empowerment. Under this chair, if I go to page 4 of the memorandum, the first query was questionable facility agreement. This is funding to Konkola copper mines. Chair, I'll be reading on page 2, so paragraph 2, sorry. Chair, the government of the Republic of Zambia, as lender and Konkola copper mines as borrower, entered into a loan facility agreement of $45 million. And this was signed by the Minister of Finance, the Secretary to the Treasury, on behalf of the Ministry, and the liquidator on behalf of KCM. The maintenance chair of that agreement was that the borrower required the funds as bridging loan facility to pay for restructuring costs, electricity, statutory and other levies pending completion of the sale of equity in KCM Smelter Co. Limited. This is the smelter at KCM. And Chair, this was bridging financing pending the sale, so that from the sales that loan would be paid. Bullet 2, the borrower shall pay interest on the loan at a rate of 4% per annum, calculated on an outstanding balance of 365 days. Interest was going to accrue on a daily basis and shall be payable monthly. On the final day of each month, the borrower shall repay the loan in full on final repayment date. The repayment date was 6 months from signature, meaning that there was a grace period of 6 months, Chair. On page 5, we are indicating that the Minister of Finance at his discretion would monitor and verify how these amounts were advanced under this agreement. Were utilized, under this agreement. So, Chair, the agreement also stated that in the event of default, the borrower, which was KCM, would pledge its shares in Smelterco Limited to the lender, which is Ministry of Finance. That's just to cover government in the event of default. Chair, the Auditor General's Office scrutinized these payments and reviewed that as of 30th June 2021, a total amount of 1 billion, which is equivalent to 44,592,108.46 US dollars had been dispersed to KCM. It was done in Kwacha, so that's why there is that differential, and there is a table that shows there. The first audit finding, Chair, is failure to monitor or verify the utilization of the borrowed funds. And the Auditor General's Office found, Chair, that monitoring and evaluation had not been undertaken by the Ministry of Finance. Chair, our response to that, we are indicating that the Treasury did undertake a monitoring and evaluation assignment on the application of funds lent to KCM in March of 2022. You may wish to note, Chair, that a team of officers were denied access to the financial records, and instead the team was referred to the former liquidator for information. We have attached, Chair, the letter that came from KCM, and also we have attached a letter at folio 1, which was written to the liquidator much earlier to try and get this information on utilization, and it was not, of course, responded to. That's when we tried to go there. We have also attached, Chair, a report on monitoring and evaluation on the same. So, Chair, what we're indicating is that there were attempts by the ministry to do the M&E, but of course we were not given access to the information that we required. Chair, the second audit query is failure to collect interest on amounts drawn by KCM As at 31st December 2021, interest amounts totaling 23 million, if you allow me, Chair, just to round off, which is 1 billion kwacha at 4% per annum over 7 months, had accrued to the government, and as of 31st July 2022, KCM had not made any interest payment. Chair, our response is that the government of the Republic of Zambia has, of course, we do agree, Chair, first to start with, that the observations of the auditor are correct. But we wanted to give comfort, firstly, that the Republic of Zambia, through the receiver, still owns KCM. The transaction to sell the smelter did not proceed, and therefore the loan, of course, was not paid. And KCM is still under challenges currently, and that since the shares are still with the liquidator, who is under the control of government, we still have that security on the shares, but the payment was not done, Chair, because the bridge finance did not actualize into the actual sale at the end of the period when it was supposed to be sold. So, Chair, following the auditor's findings, we have started the process, of course, with the hindsight, Chair, that currently there are efforts to sell the asset through finding an investor. So we have started the process of approaching the Attorney General's chambers so that we see how we can actualize this, since now the loan is in default. Failure to recover the loan, Chair, the Auditor General did indicate, if I may, since there are no figures there, that there was no loan repayment from KCM. And our response, Chair, and apologies in our response, that the second line was supposed to be deleted. I think there was a typo which you oversaw. But what we are saying is that management wishes to submit the following, and we do actually agree with the auditor's findings, that due to financial challenges that KCM is facing, and I've indicated that.
Sorry, is it possible the controlling officer can read what he has submitted so that we are following properly?
Please, you can just switch off your mic a bit. Yes, Honorable.
Is it possible that the controlling officer can read what he has submitted so that we can follow properly what he's submitting?
Thank you, Honorable. PS, kindly stick to the submission. You can proceed. We are on page 6. Thank you. 7, page 7.
I moved to 7 years.
7 years.
Yeah.
Okay.
So
PS.
sorry, Chair, I requested for permission that I summarize, but I can read it word for word if that's the wish of the members.
Yes, Honorable Mukumbi.
Yes, Chair. Controlling officer, it's important for our people out there, those that do not have a document, to follow exactly what the query is all about. That's the more reason we want you to read word for word. So that even when we're questioning you, people understand where these questions are coming from. I think it's from that background, Chair.
Thank you, Honorable Lumai.
Yeah, thank you, Chairperson. Chairperson, you agree with me that the report which the controlling officer is submitting before this committee is painful, and the way you are presenting it, it's like you are trying to dodge certain information before this committee for the sake of record. That's why the honorable member is saying maybe you would do better to stick to what you have submitted so that we are able to follow you through, because your report so far is very painful to follow.
Thank you. PS, you can proceed on page 7 and be guided that you just go by what you submitted. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I will read it word for word. So, Chair, on management response, I don't know if I read the Auditor General's query as well, or just...
You can proceed to the management response.
Okay, thank you.
Already, I think.
Thank you, Chair. So the Treasury notes the observations made by the auditors. However, management wishes to submit the following: that due to financial difficulties KCM is facing and the company is not in a position to make any principal payments on the loan advanced to it. Further, The status quo is that government of the Republic of Zambia has a total control of KCM through the acting official receiver and KCM provisional liquidator, who reports to the Auditor General and who enforce the rights to the shares even at the time of divesting of the shares at KCM. Following the recommendation to redeem the pledged shares in KCM, the Ministry of Finance and National Planning is in the process of contacting the Auditor General. Chair, the next query is on pledging of security of an asset under sale. A review of records revealed that the asset pledged by KCM as security, which is on Smeltaco, was also listed to be sold. Furthermore, the following documentation was not availed for audit: shareholding in KCM Smeltaco Limited and proposed shareholding after the pledge to issue shares, authority of Konkola Copper Mines Liquidator to deal with KCM Smeltaco Limited, and status of Smeltaco Limited. Management response. Chair, the Treasury notes the observations made by the auditors. However, management wishes to submit that a team of officers from the Ministry of Finance and National Planning was denied access to financial and other records at KCM and were advised to engage the liquidator. Efforts to engage the liquidator proved futile as he was appearing before courts of law. Further, we wish to state that the debt to KCM is secured, and therefore at the time of sale we will register our rights and get value from the sale. The next audit finding, Chair, is on irregularities in the procurement of the Zambian Chancery in Turkey. On 24th December 2020, the Embassy of the Republic of Zambia, acting through the then ambassador to the Republic of Turkey, and Bahan Asaf Safak, acting on behalf of Mita Gerime Kuz, please forgive me for the pronunciation, Yatrim Insat Sanai Ve Tikarat Limited, who was the seller, entered into a sales contract for the sale and transfer of 12 units of real properties at a consideration of $19.5 million. The terms and conditions of sale included the following, among others. First bullet: the sale transaction shall be completed with the transfer and delivery of title deeds of the real properties to the buyer. The second bullet: the buyer declares that they are not subject to tax and charges in accordance with the provisions of the Turkish law and diplomatic conditions. The third bullet: all costs and expenses related to the transfer of real properties at the land registry shall be borne by the seller, and the buyer shall pay his own attorney's fees only. And the last bullet is that the sale transaction will take place within the framework of provisions regarding the sale of immovable property between Article 237 and Article 247 of the Law of Obligation and Provision in the other laws. In a letter dated 17th March 2022, the Permanent Secretary Administration, Ministry of Foreign Affairs and International Cooperation, reviewed that amounts totaling $6,877,000 had been paid to the vendor, with a balance of $12,623,000 still outstanding as at 31st May 2022. The following were observed, Chair. 1. Lack of written advice to sign the contract and approval by the Permanent Secretary. Section 113(2) of the Foreign Service Regulations and Conditions states that no contract shall be signed without the written advice of qualified legal practitioner of the country in which the contract is concluded. The engagement of the legal practitioner shall be on a temporary basis and approved by the Permanent Secretary responsible for Foreign Affairs. Although the mission engaged Messrs. Tan Tashim Zappa to provide legal services for the purchase of the Chancery, there was no evidence that the Permanent Secretary approved the purchase of the Chancery or the engagement of Messrs. Tan, Tashina, Zappa legal practitioners. In this regard, it could not be ascertained whether the Permanent Secretary had authorized the contract to purchase the chancery or the engagement of the legal practitioner. Our response, Chair, the Treasury notes the observations made by the auditors. However, management wishes to submit that a letter requesting for information was written to the Minister of Foreign Affairs and International Relations, who indicated verbally to us, Chair, that the matter was under investigation before the courts of law and therefore could not avail us any documentation. Lack of documents to support expenditure details. Section 72(1) of the Public Finance Management General Regulations 2020 stipulates that a payment voucher with supporting documents and any other forms which support a charge entered in the accounts shall be filed, secured against loss, and be readily available for audit. During the period from December 2020 to July 2021, the Zambian Embassy in Turkey received a total of 154,300,084 kwacha, which is equivalent to $7,132,563.36, and the funds were appropriated as shown, Chair, in the table 3 on page 10. Contrary to the regulation, documentation such as bank instruction, bank transmission copy, and the bank statement from the Zambian Embassy in Turkey and receipts from the recipients of these funds were not availed for audit. Our response, Chair, is that the Treasury does note the observations made by the Auditor General. However, management wishes to submit that a letter requesting for information was written to the Minister of Foreign Affairs and International Relations, who indicated to us verbally, Chair, that the matter was under investigation before the courts of law and therefore could not avail us any documentation. Chair, the next finding is wasteful expenditure, irregular payment of penalty to seller's lawyer for delay in completing the contract. A review of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs by minute number MFA 101/16/49 dated 22nd February 2022 indicated that the seller through the lawyer had been paid a total of $6,877,000 broken down as follows: $4 million towards cost of the chancery, $1,077,000 penalty fee for not fulfilling the contract, and $1.8 million service fee for seller's lawyer. However, a review of the contract of sale revealed that there was no clause supporting payments of penalty and service to the buyer's lawyer in amounts totaling $2,877,000 US. In this regard, the payment of penalty and service fees was irregular. The outstanding amounts of the purchase price and any other obligations and instruction to the bank and payment advice were not provided as at 31st May 2022. Our response, Chair, is that the Treasury notes the observation made by the auditors. However, management wishes to submit that a letter requesting for information was written to the Minister of Foreign Affairs and International Relations, who indicated to us verbally that the matter was under investigations before the courts of law and therefore could not avail us the documentation. Chair, I submit a memorandum.
Thank you, PS. Honorable members, with your indulgence, will ask PS to present paragraph 26. Then we can proceed with the questions. Yes, Honorable Mkosa, you are shaking your head.
That was yesterday. No, Chair, I think it's better we finish with this one, because there are a lot of issues here that have been raised, which need to be adequately addressed before we move to another paragraph.
Thank you. Is that what the committee wishes to do? Thank you. Thank you, PS, for your submission, and we'll proceed. Honorable members to ask questions to that effect on paragraph 24. Yes, Honorable Melesiana, you can proceed. You can proceed. PS, you can switch off your mic.
Oh, sorry.
So you can just follow the order of the submission to that effect, and so that we can all move in the same direction. So I think the first issues on the KCM. Yes. Yes, page page 3. Yeah, 3 and 4 somewhere there. You can proceed. Yes.
No, I wanted to start with 5.
So let's start with KCM. You can proceed.
Maybe no, I'm not going to KCM first. I'm just wondering on the response on page 3.
Yes.
Where the audit query is on the variance that is there, where there was authorized provision 22, expenditure 20, and variances. Then the response is the Treasury notes the observation made by the Auditor General, which are factual. So,
on the findings, eh?
Yes.
Okay.
So, I'm wondering, what is factual here? I want to know, because for them to not have received this money or not to meet what, or not to be given the monies that were required, there must have been something that went wrong. And I think the audit query is looking at the amounts given, the amounts that were supposed to be given, and the variance. Then the ministry says it's factual. So what is factual?
Thank you. Any other question on that aspect? Or allow the PS to respond. PS, maybe can I shed more light on that?
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Honorable Member. Chair, when we wrote that it is factual, we are entirely agreeing with the Auditor General that that's the case. But if I may shed more light as requested, Chair, the performance of any budget item in the budget depends on the resources collected, and the resources collected and distributed will determine whether that budget is funded 100% or below, and in some instances there's supplementary and you go above 100. So in this instance, Chair, there was underfunding due to revenue constraints in 2021. And so we agree with the Auditor General as yes, there was lower expenditure, and that lower expenditure is due to lower receipt of funds. I submit, Chair.
Thank you. Any further question on this item, or we can move to the next one? Let's go to the next item, which is now the issue of financial management on KCM. Yes, Honorable Mukosa, then Honorable Melesiana.
Chair, it surprises me to see the issue of the questionable facility agreement relating to the funding to Kongola Copper Mines, KCM. Chair, when you look at what has been submitted, clearly, from what I'm seeing, the Minister of Finance, they didn't even do a proper assessment to see if KCM will be able to pay back this money. It's like they were putting money in a venture where they knew that the money will come back, and they were negligent to give the money. So maybe my question to the controlling officer, is that, controlling officer, did Ministry of Finance do any evaluation or appraisal or assessment to see if the money that was being put in KCM was going to be gotten back? Because $45 million is not a small amount of money. The country is grappling with a lot of problems where that money can go. Then you decide to put in an investment that you as experts, you even know that the money will not come back. Then what kind of experts are you? Where are you taking this country? Chair, my question is just to ask if they did, why they didn't do an appraisal, because clearly there is no appraisal that was done here to see if the money was going to come back. Thank you.
Thank you, Honorable Melisiana. So maybe the PS can take 2 to 3 questions. You can proceed.
Thank you, Chair. I've noted that the loan was utilized in 2021 and monitoring only took place in 2022. I'm wondering, why did it take you so long to monitor the utilization of the loan?
Thank you. Honorable Lumai, you can proceed with the question.
Yeah, thank you, Chairperson. Chairperson, as I stated earlier, riding on Honorable Mukosa's question, when you look at page 4, the following are some of the salient elements of the agreement, among others. When we get to page 5, last bullet, the Ministry of Finance, at its discretion, may monitor or verify how any amounts advanced under this agreement were used. So, Chairperson, what I want to find out from Ministry of Finance, as Honorable Mukosa stated, was this a bogus agreement? Because, Chairperson, as a government, you cannot give away $45 million and you say you may. And here we are with this report. Auditor General has not audited anything because nothing was given to Auditor General. And even the Ministry of Finance themselves, they've got no documentation whatsoever regarding this deal, because the liquidator himself also refused to give them documentation. So I wanted to know why government allowed such kind of an agreement. Chairperson, I submit.
Thank you. PS, you can proceed and answer the 3 questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. On the first question that was raised by, I think, Honorable Mukosa, on whether any appraisal assessment was made on the transaction, I would like to mention, Chair, that this agreement was a bridging loan facility, and a bridging loan facility made on the basis of the sale of the smelter at the time. That was estimated to be sold at about $500 million. So the bridge was on that facility, and the appraisal that was done, or the assessment that was done by the Ministry of Finance, was on the sale value of the asset and not the actual mine in terms of operations. So it was made on that because it was a bridge facility. We made at the Ministry of Finance an appraisal and assessment on the transaction, and given the value at which the transaction was being, the asset was being sold, and the transaction amount, the ministry assessed that at $45 million we could recover the funds. That was one aspect, Chair, that was taken into account. Chair, we also did an appraisal on the fact that electricity was about to be shut down at the mine, and there was a risk of flooding and that the asset would go down. But the main issue was that this was a bridge loan facility that was supposed to terminate with the sale of the asset. Chair, an extra step had been taken, of course, that we secure government funds by ensuring that the assets are pledged as security, so that in the event that there is default, as there is now, there is recourse on the asset once it was being sold. On the question on the loan having been given in 2021, but M&E done later on, Chair, we do M&E assessments in the Ministry of Finance on many projects, and the schedule for this particular one, after its implementation, the next schedule for M&E was due in 2022 because the first one that we had done in 2021 had passed. And if you see the report, Chair, which we indicated an attempt to go and visit the mine to see the usage, is including other facilities, it's including the airport and other facilities on the copper belt, because we usually do them at once. So that's the reason why, in terms of timing, it wasn't isolated, but there are other projects which government was equally spending money on, which the team had to go and look at. The last question, Chair, on was the loan agreement bogus, and why was it allowed? I think I did allude to the fact that it was supposed to be a bridge facility, and taking into account the fact that KCM was going through challenges and there would be flooding at the mine if things such as electricity were not put in place. These were extenuating circumstances, Chair, that had government give this facility. I submit, Chair.
Yes, Honorable Mumba and Honorable Ferrari. In that order, thank you. Then Honorable Wamnyima, sorry I didn't say.
Thank you very much, Chairperson. PS, I've listened to your response very, very carefully, and probably one of the reasons why you were able to provide a bridge finance even when you are not a bank, was because there is a relationship between the government and KCM. Now again, in your response, you have further told this committee that you could not be allowed to access the financial documents. But there must have been financial documents that were presented to show evidence that this bridge finance will be paid back within 6 months. Are you able to share with us what lessons you have learned from this transaction which has led to the loss of this $45 million? Thank you.
Thank you. Maybe before I just lose my thought, PS, I would like to find out with your M&E program, because I see that it has no time bound. Is it effective? Does it give the desired results? Because you are saying you'll have to wait. I've seen in your submission there's an airport. So even if we are losing money, we are not monitoring. We'll wait until the time when it's supposed to be done. Is that being efficient? Is it helping us as a country? Then also I would like to understand the basis of this loan, because I'm failing to comprehend. There's an issue of the asset, the smelter, wanting to be sold at 500 million. Okay, so you give a loan to say in an event that they default, we have this asset. Then again, like Honorable Mumba is saying, the same people who've given a loan, they don't allow you to go and access the financial records by the same liquidator who signed on behalf of the mine. What's a rationale? What's going on? Because you give me money, I come and sign on the same loan, then you come now to do your evaluation, your M&E, I refuse to give you access. So what is I'm not understanding, unless it's a different liquidator, or just make us understand what is, because even also I think maybe provide us with the same loan agreement. I don't know if it's provided, which was signed for by the Minister of Finance and the liquidator would like to look at the loans. And also the issue Honorable Lumai raised, very, very important. Why should we have May? So we can monitor or not monitor, it doesn't matter. Why should such clauses be in the agreement when we are dealing with $45 million? Was this money meant for a loan or it was meant for something else? Maybe that's my other question, because for me it's not telling. Maybe allow Honorable Mufarari to ask a question. You can answer the three. Then Honorable Wamnyema, you come in. Since I've also asked 2 or 3 questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I'll try to be as brief as possible. Minister of Finance, could you just avail us the due diligence report that you had and the evaluation report of this smelter for you to say it was valued at 500 million, and that actually made you to believe that you can release a $45 million because the value of the property that you are trying to finance has that value. I think that's what. So the due diligence report, we needed to see it. We need to see the evaluation report of the smelter itself, because you could not go into giving $45 million without knowing even the shareholding, without knowing without having an evaluation report to believe that this smelter will cost you 500 to sell for 500 million. Do we have those reports? Because those reports you should have before you could give out that money and to go into an agreement. I submit, Chair.
Thank you. PS, you can proceed and answer those questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. The first question on lessons learned, which was asked by Honorable Mumba, we do indeed have reviewed this lending and other lendings that have happened within the government system, that is on lending, and where repayments have not been made by different government related entities. And these entities include entities such as ZESCO, entities such as Zamtel, and of course the case at hand. And what we have done from those lessons learned is that the new public debt law has now provided a more rigorous requirement before an on-lending is undertaken. It has prescribed circumstances under which an on-lending can be done in terms of financial viability of an entity and rigorous assessments on the financial assessment that should go before such an on-lending is undertaken by the Minister of Finance. So, Chair, these are the lessons that we've learned, and these are the changes. The law was passed by this House to make those provisions. So it's more rigorous now, even on the aspect of security, which government takes. It's more rigorous than it is in the case that we did for KCM, where we tried to have security around the shareholding that was in Smelterco. So that's the answer to the first question. The second one, Chair, was yours. It had many angles to it. I hope I will capture all of them. The first one was that even when we are losing money, whether M&E was not going to be undertaken. Chair, of course, the facility was delinquent 6 months after it was signed in May. That was towards the end of 2021. And like I indicated, Chair, other facilities actually that were similar and within that purview were the ones that I have indicated, Chair, where government was spending money on the copper belt. This report, Chair, is just for the copper belt. We do M&E exercises for the whole country, and we do base it on the risk that we have seen. So this particular one, Chair, yes, was undertaken in 2022, but if you see the letter, Chair, that we wrote, and I've attached it as one of the appendices at folio 1, we wrote to the liquidator actually in January before a physical attempt was made in March. So there were processes. We had asked for the documentation, because usually what we do, we get documentation. He shows us what he has done with the loan, and after that, after we do all the analysis, then we go in physically. But this letter, Chair, I should mention again, wasn't responded to, and I suppose this is the time that there were issues between him and law enforcement. I wouldn't want to go a lot into that, Chair. Of course, these are cases in court. But for the purposes of the committee, this is a time that was back and forth. And so the cooperation, of course, that was coming from the liquidator wasn't what one would expect. So, but that's the process we followed. If you see my letter of January 17th, and also the report that came after trying to go physically in March. Chair, the question on why the liquidator refused, I think I've kind of touched on it. There's been a push back and forth between government and the liquidator, and I wouldn't get a lot into those details, but suffice to mention, Chair, that the new liquidator is working quite well with the ministry, and those processes therefore have started, and we'll see that we get further information on it, and you can also even information on the ownership now of the smelter, which the Auditor General had asked. We've managed to get documentation for it and ascertain the ownership of that, because again, Chair, I should mention that the reports of the previous liquidator were not being made to ZCCMIH as it was supposed to be, neither was it being made to government, but it's claimed it was being made into the courts. So information flow, Chair, then sometimes becomes a bit difficult because of the way things were done. Chair, you asked why the funds were made for the loan and whether there was something beyond the loan agreement. I think what we see from the point of view of the Ministry of Finance, we might be not privy to other nitty-gritties beyond that. And I should mention also, Chair, that the proceeds of the loan agreement, and we've been asked questions from law enforcement on what it was meant for, and I suppose that there is an inquiry behind that in terms of law enforcement to see if what it was meant for is what it was used for, are ongoing, and we're not privy to the outcome of those investigations. But from what the ministry provided, it has provided under the first bullet, under page 4, as the Auditor General had indicated, and those were the main items that were being covered. Chair, on documentation for assessment of the sale value, of course, the sale value was indicated as the value that was put on the market by the liquidator, because the smelter was already on the market for the same amount, and this is the basis upon which the liquidator made the request from the Ministry of Finance, and the basis upon which then the 45 million was made. On the valuation of Smelterco, I should say, Chair, that no, we do not have documents pertaining to that. Those were in the custody of the liquidator. I submit, Chair.
Thank you. PS, maybe before you proceed, Auditor General has given me the contract. Honorable members, I'm failing to understand. Maybe I just want PS to shed more light. We as a government, we have got a shareholding in KCM, right? If I'm correct. Then we are lending KCM, okay? Who appointed the liquidator? It's the same government, right? or is it the previous owners of the mine? The government, we appoint a liquidator, then we give them the loan, then the same liquidator who've appointed at government refuses to give us access. Is that right? Because I'm failing to understand this or gist. I can see names who signed here on behalf of the government, liquidator, and I find it strange for us to fail to get information from our own people who've put in there. Maybe before Honorable Mumba you come in, there was Honorable Wamnyima, then Honorable Mukumbi, then Honorable Mumba, then Honorable Lomai. Yes, Honorable.
Chair, thank you very much. Controlling officer, I think it's the first time I'm seeing an institution of government lending $45 million to an institution under liquidation. I don't even understand. How do you give $45 million to a company under liquidation? And Chair, more concern is that they are saying they had assessed this smelt and so forth, but in the entire submission they have no documentation. So who has the documentation of how they decided to lend a growing concern? Because a company under liquidation is a growing concern with no capacity to pay. Because, Chair, I may wish to understand whether there was a risk assessment for this, because when a company is under liquidation, you are not the only creditor. It means the company already has creditors. So on top of the creditors, you decide to handsomely say, here's $45 million. So who assessed the risk in this transaction? And where is the documentation? Because you are the one who paid. You should have the documentation. I submit, Chair.
Thank you. Yeah. Honorable Mukumbi.
Chair, just out of interest, PS, is it common in your ministry to see politicians commit government funds to such? We have seen quite a number of contracts signed by the ST, permanent secretaries. This one was signed by the minister himself. Is it common practice in the ministry? I submit, Chair.
Thank you. Honorable Mumba.
Thank you very much, Chairperson. And, I think it's about time as a country we were serious about taxpayers' money and where we are placing it. Honorable Chairperson, when you look at the reasons for the borrowing, statutory obligations, levies, we have had so many companies and parastatal companies, even now, owing statutory obligations, whether to ZRA or to local authorities. When you look at the issue of electricity, KCM was well protected by government by even making Copperbelt Energy their assets becoming a national carrier, just to protect KCM, because it wasn't meeting its electricity bills. In short, Honorable Chairperson, this transaction does breed a lot of questions. First of all, the timing of the borrowing was before elections. Secondly, after elections, we heard in the newspapers of the liquidator transferring into his personal account $10 million, moving another $10 million somewhere, moving another 10. There was about $30 million that was moved around, just around September. And Bank of Zambia, which is a supervisor of all the banks in Zambia, knows very well that the accounts for the liquidator, which were under a certain bank, they could have easily blocked the taxpayers' money. So, that in mind, I would like to find out from the PS the big question that all of us know, or the big question is that, first of all, the background of KCM being pushed into liquidation was political, and it was based on the fact that suppliers who are Zambians were not being paid, and so on and so forth. And therefore, government needed to act to salvage the economic activities in Chingola and Chilawombwe. But here we are. We're talking about the same Zambian people who could have actually been paid from this money, losing this money based on a transaction which is not making economic sense because of lack of documentation, and leading to this huge query. As a ministry, apart from, and in addition, Honorable Chairperson, you have heard what KCM, the owners of KCM Vendetta, what they have already put on the table. If they will be considered, they have actually ruled out a number of things that they will not meet as obligations which government needs to meet. Bearing that in mind, controlling officer, are there any other steps beyond the ones that you have highlighted which have failed that government can use as a recourse to recover some of this money, especially the money that is sitting in the liquidator's account? We all know that the liquidator is a sole signatory to the account, and if he was appointed by government, he has an obligation to government. How? An obligation actually to the people of Zambia. That's why he was appointed by government. Is there anything else that you can do to show that really we cannot just wait for this sale, which we don't know whether it will take place, so that this money, we recover even part of it, it goes to the health services where we're having no drugs and reagents and all these other challenges we're having? Any other decisions that you can make as the ministry that is responsible for our finances in this country? Thank you.
Thank you. I'll allow you, PS, to answer those 3 questions from Honorable Amnyima, Honorable Mukumbi, and Honorable Mumba. In that order, you can proceed. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. The first question was whether there was an assessment of the risks on the funds that were lent out. I am not aware of any risk assessment that was taken on what risks were on this lending, I should say. And I think it relates to the second question: do we see politicians? So this, I'll answer it in 2 parts. Of course, KCM chair, we should accept that there were politics behind KCM. That's a given. And so some of these decisions which you would see are emanating from that background. Which background now I'll be doing here and say if I start dwelling in the details of the politics behind, but I think all of us would know that behind it there were those political machinations behind KCM. So I wanted just to separate what I'm answering as technical and the politics of it. Otherwise, if I try to mix them, I'll have a bit of challenges responding. So the second question, so I would answer it in that part. The minister signed, because of CAP 366, the Loans and Guarantees Authorization Act of the laws of Zambia, which was repealed. So that's why the minister signed. He's the one who was allowed by law to sign this particular agreement. So that's why a politician, for Minister of Finance, is a different minister, because that minister is recognized as a sole corporate under the laws of the Republic, and that's why he signed. On the last question from Honorable Mumba, again, Chair, I think this borders on a lot of sides to it. Like I mentioned, a lot of issues to do with KCM are currently in the courts of law. I have also been made aware that most of these accounts are frozen now, pending judicial processes. And So in terms of recovering, I think for me, for now, is to let the due process of the law. What we have in control ourselves is the fact that with the efforts that are being done now at KCM to find a new shareholder, we register our claim of $45 million on that particular asset at KCM. And that's the step that I indicated, Chair, that we will be in touch with the Attorney General to ensure that the security that government was given at the time of the intended sale of smelter coal are still sustained and are well secured. Now that there is a default, they are crystallized and will register that interest. So that's why I wanted to answer it in two parts, Chair. I submit.
Thank you, Honorable Lumai and Honorable Mfarari, then Honorable Kalalwe. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairperson.
Sorry, Honorable, before you proceed, after Honorable Lumai, I'll allow the Vice Chair, then Honorable Mfarari will come in. Thank you. Sorry for that. She's been indicating. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Chair, from the submissions by the controlling officer, it is evident that both the Ministry and the Auditor General, they are at sea regarding this matter of KCM. And Chair, to close this matter of KCM, it will only be good, depending on what Auditor General may think. I'm thinking, if possible, Auditor General to do a forensic audit, so that this time now with a new system, maybe they can have access to documentation. Because in the submissions by Minister of Finance, they are still thinking how they can handle this matter with the Auditor General. So it means where we sit here, there is no route to resolve this matter. So I don't know if it is possible Auditor General can get back to this matter and redo it. And this time I'm sure maybe they can have access to documentation, because where we are all at sea.
Thank you. Vice Chair.
Thank you, Chair. PS, considering that this ministry is the mother of all the resources in this country, and looking at your submission, you are made to think that the law is selective, because in this case, the Public Finance Management Act was not used. And why did you delay to engage the Office of the Attorney General over this issue? I submit, Chair.
Thank you. Honorable Mfarari, you can ask honorable members. I think let's take note, this should be the last round of questions, because we've been on this. We've got other matters to look at as well. Honorable Mfarari, you can proceed.
Okay, thank you so much, Chair. May I just be guided by the PS? Was this agreement approved by the Attorney General? The other question I have is, in the absence of the documents or the documentation that is required for you to prove that the smelter actually belongs to it, or for you to understand who owns that smelter, in the absence of that, why are you so convinced that you actually get the money? What if someone comes up and says this actually is not owned by KCM, but someone else who could have just given it for, or listed it to them? Because in the absence of all these documents that we are looking for, or the auditors we are looking for, you cannot be straightforward, or you cannot say outrightly to say, I'll get the money, or we'll get the money. Because that's what you are assuming, that you have it easy to get this $45 million out of smelter coal, even in the absence of you not knowing who owns it, who the shareholder in that smelter coal is. So it just creates something. It's a lot of smoke screen going on here. So who really owns this smelter? Because in the absence of the shareholding, in the absence of all these things, how do you come out and say we'll definitely recover from this smelter coal? The other question, Chair, the other view that I have on this is, was the liquidator spending money on his own, or he was giving it to the accounts? for the accounting unit at KCM to refuse that completely, even the same arrears or debts to ZESCO on power, they never paid. Did they pay or they didn't pay? Because all those small documents should be availed. But if they are not available, then something is very, very fishy here, and we'll have no whatever but to bring in even the people that were actually involved. The minister, the former minister himself, the ST who was signing, and the rest of the people should be able to account for these monies. And there is no matter in court, I submit.
Thank you. I'll allow Honorable Mukosa to ask a question, then Auditor General, you comment on Honorable Lumai's submission. Honorable Mukosa, you can proceed.
Thank you so much, Chair. Chair, when I was asking the controlling officer if an assessment or an evaluation was done or an appraisal was done, he indicated that no, this was a bridging, more or less like bridging finance. Now, when he was responding to the question that was raised by my colleague, Honorable Amunyima, when he asked if risk assessment was done, he basically said no, he's not aware of any risk that was done. So basically what he's trying to answer is that there was actually no appraisal that was done, because there's nothing that tells you that in an event that you are providing bridging finance, then you are not supposed to do a risk assessment. Even if it's bridging finance, people access bridging finance from the banks. And I've worked for a bank myself. I was in charge of risk and compliance. Wherever you are providing bridging finance, you still do a risk assessment to just understand. You do a credit risk assessment or rating for you to profile the risk that is attached to that transaction, and to see if the person you are giving the money is going to pay back. When you read what has been indicated here, they said the loan was going to be paid after six months, implying that the people who were providing the finances, that is Minister of Finance, they were assured that this money will be paid back, whether through the process that will be generated by the, from the operations or from the sale. So my question to the controlling officer is, on what grounds did you get an assurance that this money will be paid back, or this KCM is going to be sold, and from the sale we are going to get back our money, including the interest that that accrued? Then the other question is on page 6, when you read the first line, it says we will now use the Public Financial Management Act to compel the liquidator for information. That is, you are planning to use the Public Financial Management Act to get the information that you have been denied. Why is it that you have just realized now that you can use the Public Financial Management Act to get the information? Why haven't you used the Public Financial Management Act #1 of 2018 all this time to get the information that you have been denied? Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, PS. You can proceed. Then after AG, you can come in on Honorable. Maybe AG, you can comment on Honorable Lumai's submission. Then PS, you can be ready to answer the other questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Chair. Yeah, obviously this assignment or this audit is still active, and I think the next step that the office will do is to engage various stakeholders, including Minister of Finance, on the possibility of having information that we need to carry out an audit. So yes, we are aware that there's a new liquidator and hoping that information will begin to flow. So basically that's the route that we're going to take. And depending on the availability of information, then the office will be able to see which approach it can take so that this matter could be conclusively be dealt with. So definitely, this is not a matter we'll just leave like that. We'll make sure that everything is done subject to availability of information.
Thank you. PS, you can proceed. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair, and I just wanted to mention on Honorable Umai's suggestion that we do actually welcome to work with the Auditor General on a deeper audit on this matter. I think it will help the Ministry as well. On the other questions, I was asked on the public financial management, why it wasn't used, and why the delay in engaging the Attorney General. So the Public Finance Management Act, Chair, yes, was not used much earlier because, as I indicated, there were multiple processes that were going on, and in the Ministry of Finance, we were engaging with other government investigative wings, such as the Office of the Drug Enforcement Commission and the task force. So as these processes were going on, Chair, it was a question of the ministry trying to assess what is happening on the side of law enforcement, and out of that then we see how we proceed. But on the other side, Chair, of course, the mine had reverted to a liquidator under government, under the Ministry of Justice. That's the Office of the Administrator General, which made things easier because that is an office within government circles. But Chair, of course, we have now decided that we will proceed and do the engagement with the Auditor General. But the only consolation, Chair, is that now we have a liquidator who is government appointed and is a government officer. Chair, on the whether the agreement was approved by the Auditor General, yes, it was approved. By the Attorney General. Yes, it was approved by the Attorney General. We will, Chair, probably after this appearance, write in just to submit that clearance from the Attorney General for the information of the committee. Who owns Smelter Co? Chair, I beg your indulgence on this particular one. Like I indicated, we have been liaising now with the new liquidator and we have a working relation. If you may allow me to file into committee the ownership of Smelterco. It is owned 4,999 shares by KCM itself and 1 share by Mr. Midungo Lungu. But if you may allow, Chair, I do have the PACRA document with me, which I can leave with you if committee allows.
Yes, you can give the Auditor General's office that submission.
Okay, give it. So, Chair, that's the ownership. So KCM owns the majority of it, and 1 share is owned by Mr. Midingolungu. So again, that answers the last question then on how sure we are on who owns it and the fact that we can recover. That's the document that we have used, Chair, to come up with that suggestion. Honorable Mukosa asked another question on the bridging finance and the assessment, of course, which I had already indicated that the assessment on risks, I'm not privy that anyone did that assessment, but there was a question that what assurance is there that government money will be retrieved? I think that was the gist of the question. So, Chair, again, of course, you did indicate that there could be funds that were under law enforcement now through that process of the courts.
Chair, that was not my question. He misunderstood my question.
Okay, Honorable, just rephrase quickly.
My question is not the assurance that the government will get the money. My question is based on the basis on which you based your assumption that the money will be gotten as at when the transaction was happening. What is it that you based your assumption on or assurance on that in 6 months' time KCM is going to be sold or KCM is going to have money that is going to be used to pay back the money that we are giving them? That's my question. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. PS, you can proceed.
So, Chair, the assurance on recovery was based on the fact that the smelter had been secluded as an asset on its own and what was operating, and that it would be sold, and out of the sale proceeds, then government would recoup the money. So it was incorporated on its own before the loan was given, and then it was going to be sold on its own. So that was the premise upon which that was done. Thank you.
Thank you. Honorable Mfarari, the last one, then we
Just
will
a quick
proceed.
one following the PS response and the registration from patents and companies, I think. I just wanted to find out, so at what stage was the smelter registered after the takeover? At what stage for the, because I see now that the liquidator has 1% shareholding and the rest is one share. Yeah, one share. So the rest is owned by KCM. At what stage did all these things happen? I submit, Chair.
Thank you. Thank you, Honorable Mfarari. PS, I think you've taken note how the honorable members are struggling to also just understand how this loan was dispersed to that effect. And I think Honorable Mukosa is from asking the basis. Honorable Mumba asks a lot of questions, and we are failing to understand, because a loan which is straightforward, I think it shouldn't raise a lot of issues. And us as a committee, we're not going to allow people to do things with impunity and also rubber stamping as government. Then we don't know how there are processes and procedures to that effect, which we also supposed to be carried out by you as technocrats in the Ministry of Finance. Delay, we have all those M and E's which are not giving us a needed or desired results. I think it's important that some of these things are relooked at, and we look at things which are value for money, the 3 E's, efficiency, effectiveness, because I don't think it's serving us any purpose. A lot of people have come before this committee and tell us things, but by the end of the day, come the following year, it's the same things. And I think it's important that we start mitigating some of these issues. Maybe quickly you can answer Honorable Mfarari's question, then we can proceed to the next issue.
Thank you, Chair, and we take your points seriously. Like I did indicate to you, Chair, all these lessons were taken into account when we were drafting the new law, and the new law, Chair, does require actually these assessments. It does require these monitoring exercises to be done, and that these reports are made to the Minister periodically. So it's now by law. So at the time that this thing was being done, all those regulations were not there, but out of the lessons that we learned, we had the opportunity, Chair, to bring the law to Parliament. And now it is not by choice, but by law that any officer that is assessing any lending that government undertakes, those assessments are done. Actually, Chair, with that law now, it will be difficult for entities that are struggling, even government parastatals, to borrow from the government, because the law will now preclude an entity that is under financial challenges to actually be lent money by the government. That's the way the law sits. So just to agree with you, Chair, and to mention that some corrective action has already been undertaken, at least for those that those lendings that will be done now and going forward. The question on when these changes were made, I was just trying to peruse the papers on when the actual incorporation was done. Chair, if I may be allowed with my staff just to quickly look at the submission from PACRA. Then
Yes,
we can
proceed. Where's the submission from PACRA? Or you have an extra one? Okay, you can proceed and just check.
Chair, it looks like when it's not showing when the actual, so the company was incorporated in 2000, but it's not showing here when the liquidator became a shareholder. Maybe we could get that information and provide to the committee.
Thank you so much. Honorable members, we proceed to the next item. PS, take note that we still have a lot of questions on KCM. And as we conclude on this paragraph, we'll give you our resolution or what we would want you to do on that aspect. We proceed to the irregularities in the procurement of Zambian Chancellery in Turkey. Yes, Honorable Wamnyuma.
Thank you very much, Chair. Controlling Officer, this purchase of Chancery in Turkey, how are you making payments? You made payments of $6.8 million. There is no proof of purchase between these people you are paying. On what basis? Because there's no contract entered, approved by Permanent Secretary of Foreign Affairs. And in your submission, you're saying that Foreign Affairs is not giving you this information. So, but how are you paying yourself as Minister of Finance? What informed you to make these huge payments without any proof of purchase? And today, when you are audited, that's when you want to look for the proof. So what informed these payments?
Thank you, PS. Honorable Daka, then Honorable Mumba, Honorable Mukumbi.
Thank you, Chair. Controlling Officer, for any government institution to go into or to get into any form of contract, that particular form of documentation has to be cleared by both the Attorney General and Treasury. In this scenario, there's no evidence or proof that actually you sought clearance from these two very important institutions of government. I mean, what motivated you to even go further and start honoring payments to the same effect? I submit, Chair.
Thank you. Honorable Mumba.
Thank you again, Chairperson. Chairperson, it's important for government to buy assets abroad. It's a way of cutting costs, and I do appreciate that, having had the opportunity to serve in foreign service myself. But Honorable Chairperson, we were coming from a COVID in 2020 into 2021. The economy had slowed down. The government was failing to meet its obligations by paying suppliers and also paying contractors. Again, PS, could you maybe tell this committee what really motivated this expenditure to the extent that it has now become so questionable? Thank you very much.
Thank you. Honorable Mukumbi.
Yes, Chair. In their submission, management responses, the PSC states that they had written to the Ministry of Foreign Affairs for responses, and they were only receiving verbal instructions. PSC, did you request for any written responses from the Ministry of Foreign Affairs? Surely, how credible are verbal responses? You probably just meet someone in the corridors and tells you, oh, this matter is in court, and you walk out like that. Surely, is that how government operates? You had written. They must write to you stating why they can't give you certain information, because the matter is in court. They can still itemize as such, Chair. I submit.
Thank you. PS, you can proceed and answer those questions.
Thank you, Chair. Chair, if I may answer Honorable Munyima's question by just giving a quick explanation on the process that was followed. Chair, the transaction that was undertaken was such that the Ministry of Foreign Affairs found the purchasers, the sellers, sorry, and was doing the processes in terms of the paperwork for purchase of that property in Turkey. What the Ministry of Finance did was to transfer money from the Ministry of Finance to the account of the Chancery in Turkey. And in turn, it was our embassy, our Chancery in Turkey, that did the payments to these vendors. So all these items that are mentioned by the Auditor General, and rightly so, on issues to do with transfer documentation and bank statements, and all these things were done at the embassy in Turkey and not from the Ministry of Finance. The Ministry of Finance transferred it to the Chancery. However, Chair, the Ministry of Finance, I now ask Chair, I heard the honorable members asking on what basis. I also asked the Director for IDM just to explain how the issue of a cash variation happened from Foreign Affairs so that members can appreciate how the funds moved and how the transaction moved, probably after I just give some commentary to it. So that is the way it was done. Chair, if I may jump, I will skip the other. I will go to the last question on written responses. And Chair, I wanted to indicate that this documentation, of course, was available at the Chancery in London, in Turkey, and it was also available at the Ministry of Foreign Affairs for that which needed to be at Foreign Affairs, but all the transfer documents were in Turkey. When I mentioned about the verbal response, Chair, this was a follow-up to our letter with the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, and we discussed this was an official meeting. It wasn't just verbal verbal the way it is sounding. This was in meetings. However, Chair, I did reach out to my counterpart, even at the time that the audit was being done at Foreign Affairs, and he had indicated that, of course, there was a vacuum at the embassy in terms of ambassador, and once the new ambassador had been appointed, he reached out on this documentation, and the ambassador did make a submission to him that they were collected by the Drug Enforcement Commission. So all documents were collected from Turkey, and they were collected from the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. Chair, again, I did indicate to my colleague that I have done a verbal submission. I've indicated a verbal submission to yourselves, and it would be important that the committee gets this in writing, because these are serious issues that we need to follow up on. And I did get, Chair, a written submission from my counterpart, because I needed to file it in the committee. And so it is in writing. So it was in meetings that they gave the verbal, but there was a vacuum in Turkey, so we couldn't really write the letter, get the letter from Foreign Affairs to give to the auditors. Chair, so that is what transpired. But before I tackle the other questions, probably, if you may allow, the Director to just give the cash variation that was done and how it was done, how it ended up at Finance from Foreign Affairs. I submit, Chair.
Thank you, PS. Director IDM can proceed.
Thank you, PS, and thank you, Chair. Perhaps to begin with, I would just like to mention, Honorable Chair, that the requests came from the Minister of Foreign Affairs, and in the first instance, the request was to have the procurement, or rather the financing, be done through loan financing. And that correspondence is there, indicating Minister of Foreign Affairs requesting for the Minister of Finance to facilitate a debt facility to finance the procurement of these assets in Turkey. But looking at what was prevailing at the moment in terms of the debt distressed position that the country has been in from that time, this was not a possibility, and therefore the only channel available at the moment was to finance through the budget. Now, in terms of the cash variation that PS has referred to, initially when the financing commenced, the funds were funded through a line of allowances, a line for allowances, foreign affairs, foreign allowances, that is for officers that are in the diaspora or in embassies overseas. And then that not being the appropriate line, the variation was undertaken. And this is a cash variation, not a budget variation, where resources are basically reversed from a line that has been erroneously funded to an appropriate line that ought to have been used for the funding. In this case, funding for the procurement of these assets in Turkey and at the Chancery in Turkey. So the actual a line that was supposed to be used was that one for capital expenditure, and this was done accordingly. I thought I should just perhaps render that clarification in terms of cash variation and not a budget variation. Thank you, PS, and thank you, Honorable Chair.
Thank you. I don't know if PS now we can answer Honorable Daka and Honorable Mumba's question. Then Honorable Mfalari will come in. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. In terms of the question where the Attorney General was consulted, I am not privy because this was done at the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. That's where the contracting was being done. So I will do, again, I'll give hearsay if I dwell into this. What motivated this expenditure? That's a difficult question. Again, at the expense of trying to apportion this issue, of course, we do know, Chair, that there are particular processes that are going on under the courts, and that could be answering this question on what motivated. I'm not sure, but maybe I shouldn't go more into detail. But only suffice to say that, of course, the transaction came, and there was a need, as indicated by Honorable Mumba, and to buy embassy property, which is an ongoing program around different embassies in the different locations. But Chair, what motivated, I think, partly, we do know that there are some proceedings that are going. I don't want to dwell into all those details now. So the last question, Chair, I did answer on written submissions or not.
I see Honorable Mumba is at sea. He's just there. And Honorable Daka. So Honorable Mfarari, then Honorable Mumba, you can make your follow-up. And Honorable Daka.
Thank you, Chair. Chair, I find these responses to be inadequate in the sense that, for example, let's just give bank statements as an example, and other transmission copies and so forth, receipts. The reporting order of an accountant at the embassy, I think these accountants are coming from the Ministry of Finance. I find it inadequate for them, the Ministry of Finance, to start pointing to the ambassador's absence in Turkey as something that should be upheld here. Even the Director of Finance at Ministry of Foreign Affairs reports to Ministry of Finance. So why are we finding it difficult to have these documents given so that this matter could be understood properly? I don't see any reason why the ambassador's absence should be the excuse for the person who was in charge of finance at this embassy. That should not be the case. The other question I have for the PS is the counterpart. I've seen your letter, which is dated 11th. You wrote, under normal circumstances, I think in the government systems, he's supposed to respond in a written form than for whoever was being requested to should have been able to, I don't know whether it's technical or administration, should have been able to respond in writing other than to say verbal or whatever. And it has taken long. You wrote in July and we are in November. Your response was not responded to in writing, only at a meeting maybe where you said I have these response or requests that I made to your office, and nothing came forth. Why is this kind of casual approach to these serious matters? The money that has been lost here is quite colossal for anyone to engage just in verbal talk without responding adequately. I submit, Chair.
Thank you. Honorable Daka and Honorable Mumba and the PSO.
Chair, I think we are now at sea now, because there is a $7 million payment that the Minister of Finance actually transferred to the Minister of Foreign Affairs. And we are trying to find out on what basis, because if the Attorney General didn't give a clearance to this contract, I'm of the view that before the Minister of Finance could have transferred this money, they could have had access to all the documentation justifying the transfer, and one of which is that from the Attorney General. Now the controlling officer is displaying ignorance to this committee that he is not sure whether that was done, because the Minister of Foreign Affairs is the one that actually procured that kind of a contract. Honestly speaking, Chair, I'm finding it difficult on behalf of the committee to understand the basis on which the Minister of Finance released the $7 million to the Minister of Foreign Affairs. I submit, Chairperson.
Thank you. Honorable Mumba.
Honorable Chairperson, for me it's a matter of the supervision that the Minister of Finance provides over the economy of our country, and one of the things that it's been grappling with is debt. Now, if surely an expenditure, in my opinion, that could have been postponed, looking at the circumstances that we're in at that time, where the growth rate of negative 4.5%, it wasn't necessary to procure, yet to procure something that comes back is in court. It's not clearly done. It starts to give us a lack of confidence in our civil servants, because they are the professionals who implement the budget, who implement the National Development Plan, and all these aspirations that we have. So, the supervisory role that the Ministry of Finance provides over the economy should be able to produce confidence amongst the Zambians, including the ones that are listening to our questions here, and not to have a list of unnecessary decisions that were made, and in the process creating audit queries and leading into courts of law and so on. Because the Ministry of Finance works with a plan. So in this particular case, the source of motivation should be able to be provided. Is it that we were being overcharged for a chancery that we were renting, and it would have proved cost effective to buy one? Or is it that you can pay somebody a penalty fee of $1 million and a service fee of another $1.8 million? That's what has puzzled me, considering the fact that I know how contractors and suppliers who are supposed to participate in the growth of this economy are struggling. So I wanted to have an understanding what would be the main motivation to go out there and spend money when everybody is struggling, and yet we're taxpayers here. That's what has puzzled me. Thank you.
Thank you. Maybe PS, you can react to Honorable Mfarari's question, Honorable Daka, and Honorable Mumba's question. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. To to answer Honorable Mufalali's question, so, Chair, the documents that are being requested for, like I indicated, the actual transaction of paying the different vendors, that's the lawyer, and the asset owner, was done through our embassy in Turkey, using our accountant, yes. However, I did indicate that these documents were seized from the embassy and they are not there. So that's the reason why I was indicating that. Even when Attorney General's office went subsequently, those documents were not there. That's why they're indicating that the documents were not there to be verified, and that's the reason why. The issue of response in writing, I have provided, Chair, the response from my counterpart at the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. I'm not sure if you've been availed the document in which he's confirming the fact that I've just mentioned here. The question from Honorable Daka on the transfer of the 7 million and whether Attorney General had cleared, I did answer, Chair, that this process was being done at the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, and also all the documentation actually has been taken for investigations on this particular transaction. So again, alluding to the letter that I've just circulated, Chair, that's the response. If you see the request that we made to them, and that's the response that came from the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. On the funds moving, Chair, Ministry of Finance was moving funds from one government account to another government account. And when you are moving funds from one government account to another government account, of course, the amount of documentation that is needed is a request from the controlling officer at a particular ministry. But the actual payments, we are all obliged, even at Ministry of Finance, when I'm making payments on behalf of Ministry of Finance, to check that all documentation supporting that transaction are available and adequate for that transaction. And this is where those documents that Auditor General indicated that were at the embassy come into play on whether there was following in terms of what was being paid and what was being contracted for. The procurement, Chair, was done at the embassy itself. The procurement processes and everything was done at our embassy in Turkey. Honorable Mumba's question, of course, it was partly advice to the ministry, but I do agree that, of course, the supervisory role of the Ministry of Finance is important. And I did indicate that what Ministry of Finance was doing was moving money from government to another government account. But the expenditure, of course, was being superintended over by the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. On the source of motivation, Chair, I will answer this in part in saying that we have an ongoing program, of course, on purchase of embassy buildings and on purchase of housing for staff in our embassies. And this came in that same light to the Ministry of Finance as to whether the money after it went was used for that particular government program. I think we all again know that there is some active processes that are going on with law enforcement. I submit, Chair.
Thank you, Honorable Lumai. Then Honorable Malari, then Honorable Nkos.
Yeah, Chairperson, I just want to remind the PS that he's talking to the committee with brains. You cannot make a submission that the documents were seized when you have got Foreign Affairs as an office in Zambia, Ministry of Finance in Zambia, Embassy in Turkey. When one paper is seized, then all these three offices cannot have a photocopy. So I thought maybe the PS can find a different way, if he doesn't want to tell us the truth, but to find a different way on how he cannot tell the truth, because we cannot agree missing of a paper when they authorized payment. So based on what? Because the query here is straightforward. In this regard, it could not be ascertained whether the permanent secretary had authorized the contract to purchase the chancery. So if you are saying papers were seized, how possible is it that you only did one original copy and you didn't have a photocopy anywhere?
Thank you, Honorable Ferrari.
It's quite puzzling to look at this matter here and the way the answers are coming. They don't get anywhere. They don't get us anywhere. Even engineers' reports for the ministry to proceed to buy this chancery or any other estate, where is it? Because there must have been an engineer's report to indicate that they have valued this property and this property is fit enough to be bought. Other than only Turkey, we have engineers here sitting in Lusaka who normally go out in embassies to evaluate these properties and give a report before the payment is made. Where are those reports? That's what we are looking for. Those reports are not here. They are nowhere in these responses. So where are they? What also motivated them to move away from the special conditions stipulated in the sale, where they agreed, say they will pay direct to the person who is the vendor, and start using third parties? Why did they have to drift on all these issues? I think we have more questions than answers that are coming forward. And that's why I think the Honorable Mai here is saying, I mean, we are able to read and understand. Why is the Ministry of Foreign Affairs failing to release these documents? If the file in Turkey was seized, they must have copies at Ministry of Foreign Affairs for them to have gone to the Ministry of Finance to say this property we want to buy. And there must be a report attached to it. They don't just make any request. The requisition for this should have been backed up with documents. So to Ministry of Finance, say, Ministry of Finance, we need $7 million. So that's why we're asking what really motivated them to pay Foreign Affairs. If they just made a request, a requisition or a request, say, we are just requesting for $7 million to buy. Based on what?
Thank you. Honorable Mukosa, then Honorable Wamunyima, then we should be closing on this matter. You can proceed, Honorable.
Chair, to add on what my colleagues have said, I'm reading this submission, management response on page 11, where they are saying the Treasury notes the observations made by the auditors. However, management wishes to submit that a letter requesting for information was written to Ministry of Foreign Affairs and International Relations, who verbally indicated that the matter was under investigations before the courts of law and therefore could not avail us with any documentation. Now, I do not understand how any official at Ministry of Foreign Affairs and International Relations can fail to provide documents to Ministry of Finance. What if Ministry of Finance, they also say, we cannot provide you with funding? And there is no one who can refuse to the Secretary to the Treasury. The Secretary to the Treasury is the one who has authority to designate anyone as controlling officer. The Secretary to the Treasury is the one who designates controlling officer position to the permanent secretary at Ministry of Foreign Affairs. So it is not possible. It is not possible, and there is nowhere where it says if a matter is in court, then you cannot share a document within the government circles. It just doesn't make sense. What I'm seeing is that you people at Ministry of Finance, you need to be serious. You don't just come here for the sake of coming and give the information for the sake of just appearing, because you just want to appear and go. That's how I'm seeing it myself. You need to be serious. We need to see the efforts that you have made. You were communicated to verbally. Why didn't you write? Did you make an effort to write? And what happened to the records that you have yourselves, the ones on which you based the payment? Why don't we get those? The other issue, Chair, we are asking the permanent secretary. We have a director. You said Director of Finance, Foreign Affairs. How did you pay this 2.8 million? 1 million for penalty and 1.8 for service fee, which was not provided for. Which was not provided for in the contract or in the agreement. How did you pay that? And how are you intending to recover that money? Because you have already accepted, the PS has accepted that that was irregular. So how are you going to get that money back? And how did you pay? What made you pay? What motivated you to process that huge payment? $2.8 million. If you do not know the value of $2.8 million, the water reticulation project in Chinsali, just to use it as an example, it remained uncompleted for a period of over 2-3 years because it was pending payment of 5 million kwacha, which is less than $500,000. And you are wasting $2.8 million to pay a person who has not done anything for you, who you do not owe. You are spending that money to pay penalties for an offense that you have not done. You have not committed any offense. You have not abrogated any contractual provision. What motivated you to pay $2.8 million? Chair, I thank you.
Thank you. Honorable Amnyima, I'll hold you a bit so that PS can react to some of these, because I've seen there are a lot of questions. PS, you can proceed, then you you designate one question to the Director of Finance from Foreign Affairs, I think, which has been asked by the Honorable Member. So PS, you can proceed.
Thank you, Chair. The question on the documents, Chair, if I may. So when we provide funding from the Ministry of Finance, we base it on the availability of a budget line in a particular ministry, which we can fund, and also a requirement from the particular controlling officer, and rightly who is designated by the Secretary to the Treasury, for him to get funds and expend. Chair, I would like to illustrate what I've just mentioned. If you see the way we are funding free education now, the controlling officer for Ministry of Education is in charge of that expenditure in the ministries. He makes a request to Ministry of Finance that we fund her ministry or his ministry from the controlling officer's side, and Ministry of Finance funds. And similarly, in this case, when a request is made, we fund the school directly. And it's the controlling officer then that does the supervision of those ministries, of those funds that are funded. I'm saying this, Honorable Chair, because I wanted to separate the issue of funding from the issue of payment. So the funding was done by Ministry of Finance to Ministry of Foreign Affairs directly to the embassy in Turkey, and the expenditure on that particular line was done in Turkey by the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. So I wanted to separate the two because the conclusion of the two, the amount of documentation that we need for the funding is what I mentioned, the availability of a budget line and the request from the controlling officer. But the payment by the controlling officer then takes into account all these documents. Did AG approve that contract and all those things? And so those things were done at Foreign Affairs. I just wanted to create an explanation on that. Now, Chair, when it comes to the documents, and it's an issue that I tried to discuss with the Office of the Auditor General, in instances where Ministry of Finance has done a funding, and because Head 21 is such that the funding is done from Ministry of Finance as a third-party payment, we usually require that the particular controlling officer raises all documentation, and it's happening now. I'm raising this, but it's something that I had engaged the Office of the Auditor General. All the documentation for such payments, like we're paying arrears now, Ministry of Home Affairs will raise all the documentation, do the audits, and ensure that all documentations are available. What we do from Ministry of Finance is to provide him with the funding, but the onus is on that controlling officer, and is the one who's going to account for that money in terms of whether he raised documents that were inadequate or not adequate. typically, the Office of the Auditor General, when they come to audit us, of course, they would expect now that that funding that was provided, we have that documentation at the Ministry of Finance. But understandably, I mean, if we are dispersing $6.8 billion for arrears, for example, we will not be able to have even the manpower to do that. So the onus, we put it on the ministry. So probably, I don't know if there's, it's a process issue I'm raising, Chair, whether we could jointly be audited with ministries such that all this issue of documentation, who authorized, who did what at Foreign Affairs, it is easier if, for example, I'm seated with my counterpart here and is answering those questions. So we would look from Minister of Finance as if we are being incompetent, or we are trying to, which are honorable member, we are not trying to mislead that you don't understand. You do understand. What we're just trying to portray is that there's this separation, because we need people who have been given government funds to be responsible for it. And then they report back to the ST. And when the Auditor General, of course, that's the mechanism also we have, is the Auditor General going to confirm that the money that Ministry of Finance provided, did Ministry X expend it accordingly, or they misspent on those funds? And so with that, of course, the Secretary of the Treasury takes action out of those reports. So this is the way this payment went. And when we say we don't have documentation at Finance, it's because we're providing it to another ministry that has a controlling officer who was supposed to do that. Now, internally, of course, there are questions: did the Permanent Secretary at Foreign Affairs authorize it or not authorize it? Those are the processes probably now that the Auditor General, of course, wanted to satisfy himself with. I thought I mentioned that. Now, when I spoke to my counterpart and I asked him to write, the reason why I asked him to write is because when, I'm not sure, I think, Chair, you've done your service in government. When the investigative wings seize documents, they seize the entire file. So it's not like they seize parts of documents. So they'll take the entire file, and it's indicated as such. And I suppose, and as the Director from Foreign Affairs will be presenting, just present on that aspect, on what document, how the documentation was taken, because usually they take the entire file, because they want to follow through who did what, where was the authority, and the like. So that's how these documents are taken, Chair. So when we made the request to Foreign Affairs, it was for us to lay hands on these documents and give them to the Office of the Auditor General. I am aware that the Auditor General did go to Turkey, and in Turkey also these documents were not available. For example, there is a reference by the Auditor General on the contract of sale revealed that there was no clause supporting payments of penalty. Again, this information will lie at Foreign Affairs, not at Finance, because at Finance our job was to provide the funding. But I know, Chair, that it's a serious issue. There are a lot of things behind the payment. And what I'm trying to explain is process, and those documents, of course, were seized because there was something wrong with the actual payment other than the funding itself. Chair, with your permission, if I may allow the Director from Foreign Affairs just to...
Thank you, PS. Director, Finance, Foreign Affairs, proceed.
Thank you very much, Chair. Thank you very much, PS. It is very, very difficult for me to talk about the documentation which was seized. When the investigative wings came to Ministry of Foreign Affairs, as the PS has already alluded to, they got all the documentation that pertained to that transaction, and they also proceeded to go and follow up at the mission itself. That is how come we don't have documentation in our possession. I submit, Chair. Thank you.
Maybe before the members come in, I'm trying to understand. When they came to collect these documents, is there no signing of what they pick? And because in turn, they're going to retain those files once they're cleared with the investigation. There should be some kind of accountability where they sign to say we've picked so many files, and also you have that in your custody to say this is what we have. Maybe through the PS Director, Finance.
Thank you very much, Honorable Chair. Yes, when they seize these documents, there is a seizure notice that is supposed to be given, that they have seized such and such documents. Thank you.
Yes, Honorable Mfarari. We need to quickly conclude on this.
In your handover of a seized document or seized file, you indicate the documents that are being seized. Do you do that, or you just give the file and say, this file I have given, let it go and be, or you indicate the letters that are in there? Because what if the file comes back and some of the letters are missing? How will you know that the letter went missing the other side?
Thank you. Director of Finance, you also didn't answer Honorable Mkosa's question, how you paid the 2.8 million, on what basis? On those clauses which were not in the contract concerning is it the service fee and I think the penalty or something like that. Maybe just clarify that. Then I've seen Honorable Melisiana and Honorable Wamunyima. You can quickly ask, then so that we wrap up.
Thank you, Chair. In addition to Honorable Mkosa's question on the payment of the 2.8 million US dollars, PS, you did indicate in your submission that the payment of this money was irregular. How are you going to recover this money?
My question goes to Director of Finance, Foreign Affairs, through the PS. Director of Finance, first of all, Chair, I have not seen an attachment of the contract for this, unless if it's just my file. This contract for this. So as such, we are left to spiritually discern, you know, what was going on. Now, does this property have title deeds? And if so, was it part of seized documents? I submit, Chair.
Thank you. Director of Finance, through the PS, you can answer those questions, then PS will react to Honorable Melisiana's question. So you can proceed, Director of Finance.
Thank you very much, Honorable Chair. Yeah, the payment was based on the documentation that was provided at the time. Already, honorable members, we are talking about us not having these documents right now, which can act as evidence of the payment. Because usually when we are making payment, there should be some kind of evidence. So without that evidence right now, as the honorable member has said, we can just spiritually discern. But at the time,
Chair, is the PS budget has indicated that the file that was seized was, according to Foreign Affairs, the file was in Turkey. When DEC went to Turkey, the file was picked. Now, the director and the Minister of Foreign Affairs, they cannot start claiming that there was no documentation, because when you look at the time of payments, when they did these payments, actually these payments were due for the officers back in Turkey to make returns to them. So they cannot say the file for Turkey went missing, then the returns, they don't have them. No, it cannot work like that. They must have returns based on the amounts that they disbursed. That were supposed to be the returns that were supposed to be made by those who were in Turkey to them to account for the money that they were giving out.
Thank you.
Chair, sorry, yes. And the other thing, the question is that, look, the PS has acknowledged that the payment was irregular. We are not talking about the evidence or a proof of payment to show that the payment was made. We know that irregular payment was made. So now we are asking that, why did you make an irregular payment? That's the question. Because the payment that you made was not covered in the contractual agreement. In the agreement, it was not there. So why did you pay a penalty fee when you were not supposed to pay a penalty fee? Why did you pay a service fee to a person who you were not supposed to pay a service fee. You paid service fee twice. To the person who was assisting the Zambian government, you now also pay to the person who was assisting the seller. Why? Why did you pay in that irregular manner? That's the question. We don't want you to provide us with evidence. We know the evidence. The fact that the money is not there, and our good friends, the Office of the Auditor General, they have assisted us. And we can rely on that as evidence that yes, payment was made. But the question is, why did you make that irregular payment? Or maybe you don't have an answer. If you don't have, you can also say you don't have.
Thank you. Thank you, Honorable Mkosa. Director of Finance, kindly answer the question as asked, and so that we can proceed and make progress. You've been asked a question. The question is to answer. Is it, why did you make those payments, which are irregular? I think just proceed quickly and answer, then PS will react to the last question.
Thank you, Honorable Chair. At this point, I don't have an answer to why the irregularity occurred. Thank you.
Thank you. PS, maybe react to the question from Honorable Melisiana. If then we can now wrap up. We'll go to the next item. Even the issue of the title deed, which I think they don't have.
Thank you, Chair. What we will do from the Ministry of Finance is that we'll immediately get in touch with the DEC, because the way we see it is that this recovery can only be done through legal processes. I'm not sure if anyone would want to, especially a foreigner, would want to return this money in this way. So we'll get in touch with DEC and the Office of the Attorney General to see how this money can be recovered, but also try and check on what basis whoever was processing payment processed this, because that's also an issue that we need to take up on the particular accounting officers in Turkey that was making this payment. I submit, Chair.
Thank you. Auditor General's Office, any?
Yeah, thank you very much, Chair. Just to clarify one issue on the visit to Turkey. The office actually didn't go as far as Turkey. The intention was there. We did actually request the funding through the Minister of Finance, so that this trip could be undertaken. But unfortunately, the funding was not made. So, if the funds are available, the office obviously will be willing to go to Turkey to conclude this audit. But also to just talk about the documents that were seized. We expect that there should be a document that is actually details all those documents that were seized. If this is available, it will be very useful for us, because it will be easy for us to trail which documents specifically we are looking for using this seizure document. In the absence of that, I don't believe that the DEC would just get everything without really leaving a record behind. Otherwise, then it will be very difficult to track where the documents are. Chair, I submit.
Thank you so much. Honorable members, I think we've looked at these two issues. And PS, I think you've seen how the committee has labored. And it's disheartening to have such a submission, especially of such a kind, and also just failing to ascertain why and how people could just make payments like that. And these honorable members are my witnesses here. Even last year, these are the same issues we're talking about. I don't know if it's business as usual in government. We have to, it's after the fact. Then now we try to find how do we mitigate these issues. I think it's not helpful to the nation, and it's important, PS, that people are conferred with some of these duties. They should work prudently and ensure that government funds are safeguarded to that effect. you can see that the KCM issue, the Chancellor issue is not conclusive. There are a lot of questions to that effect, and I think we'll advise you on you can gather all that information, and then it should be verified by Auditor General's office, so that some of these things can be looked at further. Also, the issue of them doing an audit, because as we are here, it's not conclusive. We've just asked questions and everything is just hanging in there. So PS, with that said, let me take this opportunity to thank you. I know there's another PS outside who need to do the other paragraphs, if I'm not mistaken. You were just doing the loans and investment, but be rest assured that as a committee, we are not happy with the submission, with the answers, and also even with the submission from your counterpart, because that letter is written, he wrote it yesterday, which is the 7th of November. And like AG is saying, there should be a document to show what was picked and what is with DEC. But I'm happy you're saying you contact DEC through your channels and ensure that we have some of those issues. So thank you so much. Let me take this opportunity to lift the immunity which was conferred before you and your technocrats. Thank you so much. PS.
Before we go, I think let the ministry give us the seizure copy of the file. We'll put it on our record.
Yes, like I've guided on, but I think it should be provided. PS is saying they'll I don't think you have it now.
Not in the Ministry of Finance, but we will work with Auditor General and the Controlling Officer in Foreign Affairs.
Please, let's have that submitted to Secretariat, to the clerk, to that effect, so that at least we have a record that this was done and when it was done. Then the other documents can be provided. So, PS, thank you so much. You are free to go. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, honorable members.
Thank you.